Good evening. Welcome to Be Informed. My name is Carl Buhariwala, and I founded Be Informed to help people make good decisions. Today, we're looking at team development, and we're joined by Jake Harris, who will be taking us through a seminar on how to hire, onboard, and develop a great team. So, before I proceed, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which we're meeting today and pay my respects to their elders, past and present. And today's session is being recorded. So if you are unable to make it today or you're going to join late or have to move out and come back into the meeting, don't worry. The entire session is recorded, so you can watch it online at your convenience through our YouTube channel. The information presented in today's seminar is current as of today and is being presented out of Australia. And given the fact that this seminar covers off on general team-related development and doesn't cover any regulatory matters, your reliance on this from an outside jurisdiction or even at a later point in time shouldn't be too detrimental to you. In terms of housekeeping matters, if you have any questions, please send them through to me in the chat function and I will relay them to Jake, who can then answer those questions for you. And Jake has also very kindly prepared a one-page handout which will summarize the contents of today's seminar. So you have that handy with you and you can share that document with friends and family, whoever needs it, right? So we hope you find today's session useful. And with all that in mind, I'll now hand over to Jake of Upper Limit Business and Mindset Coaching to take us through the seminar on how to hire, onboard, and develop a great team. Over to you, Jake.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Carl. So hiring, onboarding, and developing a great team, it's one of the most important things we can do in business. I think the why piece of this is a huge element. So around 70% of costs in business on average go to developing, maintaining, paying a team. So not only this, but the amount of time you spend with a team, you'd find is pretty close to the waking hours we spend with loved ones. So for me, I think it's a pretty important problem to solve. If you get this right, huge rewards in this space. If you don't, work can really feel like a grind. So today I'll cover off 5 points. We'll break it down into hiring, onboarding, and developing the team as you go. So it's quite broad. Welcome questions at the end, but at this point, we'll jump straight into it. So the first major point for me is around hiring with intent. A lot of people, when they lose someone, is the major reason that they start looking to hire. So in those cases, what we do, and the mistake we see people make, is they jump straight from exactly what they had in the past and they try to replicate that. Now, that can be all good and well, but we find the problem with that is that if the world has changed around you, you've gone and, different dynamics, different things going on in the broader world. If you just go and hire and replace with exactly the same thing, it's very easy for business to pass you on. Not only that, but no two people are identical in that space. So it's really hard to replace like for like. So what we do instead, and I think people who hire really well, who hire successfully, you look to think about why you really are hiring for this role. So a couple of questions straight away. Is it about replacing directly and about stability, or is it about hiring for a new role? Breaking that down further, are we talking about trying to maintain status quo with this role? Or do we want to really grow the business and take it to another place because that's a completely different type of hire? Or is it about adapting to something we've seen in the outside world? So maybe it's a bit of a mix of both. And when we get really clear on that, it makes things a lot easier. So to jump forward, you can imagine what it's like when you're onboarding a team member. If you're not clear about what that role is, it's really hard for them to thrive in that space. You're leaving so much to chance because they're guessing as well. So what we want to do really early on is get super clear about why we're hiring for the role. And there are some ways we do that. So we start with really good questions. So like I said, am I expecting this role to create stability? Am I looking to add order to the business, or is it about growth? Other really strong questions like, how long do I want the person to stay in the role? So there are some roles within your team where you really would love to have someone just stable for 10 years in that space. There's a personality type that's likely to fit that. There are other roles in the business where you might want someone who's going to be a bit more of a, let's call it a shooting star in that space. And you have to acknowledge that you might only have them for a couple of years. In that time, you can get a great reward and they can really take your business to places. But it's not likely within your small business to be able to give them every opportunity at every step on the way. So you might only have these people for a while. When you understand this and you can really map the business out built around that, it makes it so much easier to hire for intent, because suddenly if we know it's about growth, we're looking for a certain attitude. If we're looking for stability, it's about a certain attitude, archetype of a person we're looking for again. So being super clear on what we're actually looking for out of the role is one of the most important things there. I think a really good question is, what should this role produce? So another way to say that would be, if this role was really successful, we're jumping forward in the timelines, what would I see as a deliverable, or what would I see as an output of that? Now, answering that question tells you really quickly and easily, what do I want from that role? So reverse engineer in that sense. Once you're really clear on what you want from that role, what the key outputs of it would be, what success would look like, it's much easier to hire with that in mind and to align your interviewing questions and the interactions around that. A really simple way to put that is, how will I know if it's working? So asking that question, how will I know if it's working? Now, if you're a very small business and there's only 1, 2, 3 of you, a micro business, it's very easy to answer, because how will I know it's working is, what are the things that I won't have to be jumping into personally? And that, a lot of the time, that's a reason we're hiring someone, is because we're getting sucked away from our highest value work. So being really clear about that is super important. In larger businesses, a little different, and we want to think about, again, if it's hiring to replace, what are the elements of that role we want to actually replace? Finally, is it a role about profit generation, or is it a support function? So sometimes it's not that simple, but being quite clear, is this role about trying to make more money for the business, more income, or is it a fulfillment-based role where I want to create order, get things out the door quicker, provide a better customer service, create more order and structure? Knowing which one of those two it is, because often they don't mix, being really clear on which one of those two it is makes things a lot easier, and again, makes it easier to hire for personality type. So some of the ways we do that. The first thing is, don't just copy what you do. So if we're talking about that small business scenario and you're doing this role and it's something you're looking to hand over, yes, we want to identify the key work that you're doing, but what we don't want to do is also load in some of the waste that you've got in the role. So this applies to you if you're copying an element of your role or replacing. Use the knowledge you've got from the work you've done and the experience you've had to really make sure that we're pulling the best key 1, 2, 3 things out of that role, and then look at what doesn't fit into that. So just as important as what do I want from this role is, what do I not want from this role? What were the areas we wasted previously? A great way to do this, and to give you an example, a client of mine has worked and they had a storeman, so someone who's ordering for them, receiving orders, packing orders, sending things out. They're a great team member and they left. Now, they weren't able to find someone immediately, so one of the managers and owners got sucked into that role because they're key functions. Now, originally, they had that mapped as a 40-hour-a-week role, full-time. And I'll talk a bit more about this later, but work expands to full-time. They actually found that when they're in that space and doing that role themselves, the key functions probably only took about 6 hours in the middle of each day. Now, hiring with that in mind, straight away, do you want to have that as a part-time role and have it as 30 hours across the week? Or what else do you want to put into that role instead? So once you identify those key functions, the way to think about that is, I'd call that a reverse pilot. So a pilot, if we're thinking about it in terms of like a TV show or a test we do, small controlled environment where we put something new into play and see how it works. Quite often in small business in particular, reverse piloting is actually more effective. So only in the absence of that role can you see the real pain points it creates. Now, I'm not saying go and knock out 3 of the team and see if you can save money that way. What I would say though is, if the opportunity presents to actually look at the situation where you've got a gap, study it with that intent and look at what the key elements of that are that you are now missing. Just another general tip and point on this: if you're lacking viewpoints, if you want to inject new viewpoints or move into new markets, often looking for diversity is really important. So different types of diversity. It could be around different ages, people with different life situations, people who've had different experience. The real point in this for me is if you end up with, let's say a GP practice, a medical practice, 6 doctors who have gone through the same training at the same age and have worked together are likely to come to fairly similar conclusions. So that's where introducing diversity can give you really interesting new viewpoints and actually challenge the status quo. So if you are looking to grow and adapt, maybe looking for those elements of diversity and viewpoint and hire is one of the best ways to do that. When you're really clear on what you want from the role, so you've done the thought, you've looked through it, you've looked at what the key deliverables are, then what you're looking for is attitudes and strengths and then fit with the team. So as I said before, in small business, you're probably spending as much time with these people, your team, as you are with your loved ones. So it's pretty important to get it right. The same is true for your team members. So it's super important, if you've got anywhere between, let's say, 5 and 15 employees, in a larger business, one person not gelling with a team isn't the biggest deal. If you've got 5 employees and one person doesn't get along with the rest, you've got 20% of your workforce not getting along with everyone. So in the sense that I'm saying, also look for attitude and strengths. It's really important that we look for fit and team dynamic. And there are some ways you can test for that, but really simply, that's one of the biggest things you'd be looking for in probation as you get into onboarding. But find opportunities for them to work with other team members and see how they interact. It's one of the best ways to tell if they're going to flourish or not. I think finally on that point, when you are putting up a job ad, don't be generic. So every single business values innovation, trust, integrity. There's no point listing it. Much the same as everyone has a pulse, but you wouldn't put that on your resume. Think about the things that make you quite different from other businesses. Now, this comes back to culture, and culture really simply I'm referring to today is how we do things around here. Think about what that fit is. And again, so what's the team like? Are they quirky? Do you like to have shared lunches? I would mention those things in job ads, and I would actually be talking about those cultural dynamics early on, because again, if this person isn't going to be a good fit, we want to save them the time, and we want to save ourselves and the team the time and the pain of going through someone coming on board that it doesn't really work for. So a lot there spent on hiring, but the summary of the key themes that we want to talk about are really define for the role and what you want from it, and then select for the right motivation, skills, and personality fit. That's a summary of the hiring piece. Next slide there, if you could, Carl. On to the next one, we're talking the myth of set and forget. So super common one I see. Great, I've hired the perfect candidate, I've got them in, wipe the hands clean, on to the next thing, because we don't want that to be a problem anymore. But this is absolutely the wrong way to go about it. So I think a great thing to think about here is early on, you get the chance to set someone on a trajectory. So you get to imbue them with your vision of the business. You get to set them on the right path. If you do that well early, any time spent there returns 10 to 1. It's a massive mistake to leave them to their own devices. So just because they've done that role before or something similar in another business, your business is different and unique, and your team is different and unique. So it's really important to set them up with those right cultural fits with your vision of the business. Left to their own devices, basically you'll get their vision for the role, which in time can be good, but early on it's really important to set them up in line with everyone else, so pulling in the same direction. Another key point here is around there's a phenomenon called Parkinson's law, which sort of states that work expands to fill time. So no one gets out of bed in the morning to say, well, nearly no one gets out of bed in the morning to go to their 40-hour-a-week job and just phone it in and be terrible at it. So if you don't give them a clear guidance of what the role really requires, how it works, they're going to fill it up with things that they think are important. Now, some of those might actually be a good fit for the business, but some might not be. And you get a real rare opportunity early on in the piece to be able to set them up, to get them in, to get them working around the key deliverables that you want that work well for you and the rest of the team and your customers. So again, you've done the work in the first piece to really map out the role, to have it clear, to know what the key deliverables are, spend the time in onboarding and helping them really get set on what the role is and what success looks like. So some ways that we do this, like I said, share really clear expectations for the role and verify outputs. I think it's one that I see missed a lot, is verifying that people are making meaningful progress on the outputs that you've set for them. So it's one thing to get wrapped up in a story and a feeling that this person's going really well. Having a clear direction for what the role should be, how it should look, and how it develops over time, there'll be goalposts you can put in around that. So it's really important to have those checkpoints because in business, we're busy, right? Particularly in small business, 6 months will flash by in a moment. And before you know, it's too late to really set a good trajectory. Again, around that culture piece, it really does take time to understand what the culture of the place is. And you want to dedicate time to that. And ideally, you want it to be from your narrative, from your ideas around how the business should work and how people should interact. The way that you do this, I would always spend a lot of time showing the employees where and how to access both information, and initially that might be you, which is okay, so setting up time for that. But it's not just the information, it's also how do they access key relationships. So who do they go to for what? Which kind of customers do what? How do they interact with them? I'll touch a little bit more on this later, but it's a super important thing because you don't want to end up in a hub and spoke situation where all information flows through you. So around themes of onboarding, to really break it down, it's about explaining, training, and team integration, which is the one I see people miss all of the time. Spend the time there, and again, that's rewarded tenfold. Just one more point I would touch on there is that just because you have a PD set up and where it starts, that doesn't mean that's what it has to be set in stone for forever. It's printed on paper, not carved in stone. If you are doing the right things in your business, if you're setting your vision, if you're looking outward and then adapting inward, you get this ability to understand what you need from a role at a certain time. Now, I'm not saying just flip it on its head overnight, but as you start to work with someone, you understand their strengths and their areas of great opportunity. That's where you can make a real difference and align the roles around that, and maybe, take a little bit from someone else, give it to them, balance the team up, things fall into place. On to the next one. Thanks, Carl. Oh, sorry, Carl, could I grab the next slide there? Thanks. In terms of how we do this, so put really simply, bigger picture and then jump into the details. We need a mix of both. Either on its own doesn't work. So the best way to think about this for me is, if you can imagine a time, pretty much everyone's done a jigsaw puzzle before. We know how frustrating they can be. Imagine how frustrating it would be to do a jigsaw puzzle if you could never see the box in the first place, so you didn't know the image you were trying to build. That's what it can be like for a new employee joining your business. Now, to stick with the analogy, just because you've done a jigsaw puzzle before, you could have done 100 before, it's still going to be difficult for you to get in and do a new jigsaw puzzle if you've never seen the picture. Now, in this case, you can't actually show them the jigsaw puzzle box because it's in your mind, but you can describe the bigger picture to them. So you can do that through examples where you say, it's a landscape image and the bottom 2/3 are greenery. There's a windmill in the top left. You start to do that and people can understand how to piece the bigger picture together. And this is where a lot of the vision comes in. So that's the context piece there. If you don't provide the context, it's like trying to get them to do a jigsaw without ever seeing the box, right? So the way that we help them with the contextual stuff, I'm talking about analogies, metaphors, helping people understand new concepts. So in adult learning, one of the best things you can do if someone has no frame of reference is give them, it's a bit like this. So if I were to describe that for my business, I do business coaching. I focus a lot on perspective. I might say to a team member, I'm a bit like a psychologist for your business, or I'm a bit like an optometrist for your business. I'll put lenses in front of you to look at your situation and see them clearly, and you'll tell me what's better or worse. So what we're doing for context there is, it's a bit like, giving them those frames of reference to help them fit their existing experience and apply it to your situation. Now, on the other hand, I've got written there, concrete makes a solid foundation. So you can't just stay up in the clouds with the airy-fairy, bigger picture things. You need to really help them get set. So great ways we do that are clear, well-defined examples. Show them and tell them what good looks like. So this could be a buddy program, so them observing someone else do the role that you think does it really well. This could be things like guides, like flow charts. Manuals I'm less of a fan of, but can be very useful. Checklists I'm a huge fan of. They make it super simple to make sure you've done the right things. So an explained checklist handed over, or even frameworks sort of get between the two. So some examples of this, you could give them a phrase like, a successful day in your role looks like this. Or, an ideal week, you do this on Monday, you do this on Tuesday, it all comes together. Another example I really like is using comparatives and modeling what good enough behavior looks like and what great behavior looks like. So if I were to use that example with, I was hiring for an accounting firm, I might say a good accountant files taxes on time, a great accountant gets in touch with clients 3 months before and schedules tax planning so that they can make the most of the situation. You can see how there really easy that comes together. And everyone has examples of that in their business. And literally this could be as simple as creating just a side-by-side comparison chart around benchmarks of good and great. Have a conversation around it and get some feedback. Now we need to do both of those two things together. So how do we bring it all together? I'm a huge fan of micro rapid feedback. So if you're in the situation, you see something, make a small correction, help them stay on track with it, right? Outside of that, though, I think it's really important as well to have some set points, some frameworks. Let's say it's a weekly catch-up where you've got time to give some feedback, contextualize things for them, help them get set on the journey and really calibrate so that both you and the team member are very aligned on where they are and what their progress is and how it's going. Because no one wants to get in that situation, 3 months down the track, they think they're flying. Before you know it, you've got to have that horrible conversation where you lay them off. It's too far gone at that point if you aren't aligned in how you think they're doing with the role. So huge fan of small, micro, rapid feedback. Do it close to the situation. I think, classic idea around it, but you wouldn't give a dog a command to sit if you were training it and then give it a biscuit in 3 weeks because you can't connect those things. Humans are very different and a lot more involved, but equally, humans learn best when we're given rapid, instant feedback. Again, around this context and concrete piece, it's really important to give the team the why, the what, and the how. Now, I think as time goes on, less of the how, and that's where you can get real growth out of the role. So giving them the why of what you're doing, give them the what, so the activities piece, and then letting them work out how they deliver the hows. This includes sort of letting them fall over with things, getting stuck into it themselves, finding new ways to do it. This is a fantastic way to grow the business. Really, to bring that all back together is combine the concrete and the concept piece or context. A way you would do that is thinking about the phrase, we're trying to do X because Y, and here's where you can find out more if you're not sure what to do. Really strong way to think about it. Next slide, please. So once you have the team, you've got the team member on, we're into the development phase well and truly now. So it's one thing to have the team member up and running well on their own. It's another altogether to have a strongly networked team. Now, first phrase on page there says, if you want to be involved in every decision, you'll have to be involved in every decision. Yes, I get why you do that. Early on, you've built it. It's your baby. It's worked with you solely. You've built it to this point. Letting go of some of that control can be really difficult for people. However, if you don't, you will be burdened with having to make every decision forever. To really grow the business and the individuals within it, you need the team to be able to make decisions on your behalf. Some of them will be wrong initially in your eyes. That's part of the learning process. If you ever want to get to a situation where you're able to step away from it, super important that you actually set the team up to make decisions on their own. The other part about this is how do they interact with one another? So it's one thing for them to be able to make decisions on their own. It's another altogether for them to be able to make decisions on their own and as a team and act in the business interest. So if you can visualize two different scenarios, one is where hub and spoke model and all information comes through you in the middle, disseminated in and outward. Another, and this is what I would be aiming for, is a spider web model where you have the team networked point to point and they can go direct. A really great way to visualize and demonstrate this is for anyone from Melbourne, you would know the train network really needs to run in and out of the central points, which can be super frustrating if you want to catch a train. So, for example, to go from Sunbury Station at the end of the line to Craigieburn, you need to go about 90 minutes in through Southern Cross Station and back out again. If you drive there by car, it's about 35 minutes. That's a great way to think about information flow and decision making in your team. So if you want to be as busy as Southern Cross Station in your business, hold on to everything and make every decision yourself and insist that information comes through you. The way I think about this is like you want to put in a bus route and trams and a city loop and a second cycle to the point where, yes, you're at the center of it, but really it's self-sustaining and information and decisions can flow from point to point. How do you actually do that? One of the most important things you can do to bring that all together is networking your team. So it's super important that any two roles that interact, both person A and person B, need to have a clear understanding of the responsibilities and key areas that both roles look after. Help them understand one another and how they interact, how their cogs fit together, if you will. You do this by continually offering up ownership to them, giving them buy-in, helping them really grow themselves and take their roles in directions that they see within the vision would be beneficial. Really importantly, like I said before, we need to encourage the team to problem solve on their own. Once they know the why and the what, leave the how up to them, including letting them fail. The way I think about it at this point is you want to get the business to a point that it's a well-oiled machine, it's a vehicle, and you can then drive it to where you want. Next slide there, please, Carl. Thinking about it there, even well-oiled machines need maintenance sometimes. So your job, once you've got this vehicle for your business, this thing put together, look outwards, set a direction, and then steer the team. Now, really simple model of leadership for me, set the vision for where you're going, chunk it down into steps and just get one step out in front and say, come with me. Invite people along the way. So the phrase going out on a limb is risky because you don't know if it'll hold the weight. Be the one to go out there first and say, here we are, we're going and doing this. Model the behavior you want to see in the team. Another way to think about it is conducting the orchestra. So orchestra conductors are trained classically. They know how to play the instruments and read music. But if there's no one, say the lead violinist is missing for a night, they're not going to jump down in the pit and start playing themselves, because a more important role is to stay at the head of the orchestra, to tune it, to bring up the woodwind, to bring up the brass. That's a little bit too loud. It's really important that they tune the orchestra and create a beautiful environment for the audience, your customers, to be in. Put really simply, you want to be able to look outward and then adapt inward. So you're at the head of this vehicle. Someone needs to be looking out to business change. So the world changes around you, your business needs to be able to adapt with it. Now, you do that by continually sharing the vision, by updating them, by taking them on that journey with you, saying, come with me. In terms of bringing it all together, it sounds like tons of work, I know. So why would you do all that? I think really simply, it adds value to your business and your life. So like I said, you're showing up in this place anyway. You're there generously 40 hours a week. It's probably more for most business owners. It's pretty important that that's somewhere you want to go and have passion and drive for. And just the same for your team. So if you do these things well, it's so much more pleasant for everyone. Equally, you want to make it a place that everyone is excited to come to, where ideas flourish and people grow. And that's what really creates transformation and memories. And not only that, but it's infectious to your customers as well. So it's such a virtuous cycle. You trust the team this way, it grows and flourishes. This is what you need to do to be able to have holidays, to have a business that sells, to really have a team that is independently working together to drive a vision. That's a business that can sell or run under management, which is the goal for a lot of us. That's it from me. Thanks for tuning in, and definitely good luck on the journey.
Thank you, Jake. That was a great seminar, and Jake's details are on screens. If you do have any questions, feel free to contact him directly. And for those who joined a bit late, don't worry if you missed the start of the seminar. This session is being recorded, so it'll be made available on our YouTube channel following the closure of today's session. And also, Jake has prepared a one-page handout, which I'll share through to the registered participants by email. So you'll have that document handy and can use it or share it with family and friends. So we'll now jump into the Q&A. And Jake will start off with a few questions that we received ahead of time.
Great.
But one question that we've got is around the reflection piece, right? So, we talk about hiring with intent and, I'm sure most businesses will go through quite a robust process, right? To draft a PD and review candidates and hire the person that will best fit into their team. And what happens then if that doesn't work out? So, for example, the person that you've hired doesn't feel like they're fitting in well and wants to leave, and they do leave. What reflections can be done by the team to think about whether they got the fit right for that person, or did they set the expectations correctly? Do you have any thoughts on that when things don't go well after you've hired someone?
Definitely. So I mean, in those situations, if I'll answer one part first, which would be around if you do need to separate from that person, I think it's really important as soon as you know to make it know if you have a suspicion that it's going that way. Personally, I think you have a duty to bring that up with the team member and be really clear and give that feedback, and certainly give an opportunity to grow and be quite clear in your expectations of what's lacking or what would need to change. Ideally, if you're doing your onboarding well, you will have given rapid calibration. So to give a different example, in an ideal world, if you're giving your team a performance review, nothing in there at all should come as a surprise to them because you're engaged with them regularly. You know what's going on. In terms of if you do have to move that person on, I would say personal ideas around it would be, as soon as you know and are sure, you move quickly on that. You're positive, and I would say where possible, even act to place them in a role that's more suited. So offer to be a referee, be positive about it, give them that feedback, and be clear that I don't think you're a good fit because of these reasons. Obviously within legal bounds and the dismissal process, but then actively work to place them, because if you've hired well and you've got a personality fit, in the end, the reason you're probably letting them go is due to poor scoping or inadequate hiring. So if you haven't done your due diligence to begin with and really selected the right person for the role, I think, like we're talking about someone's livelihood and it's such a sense of identity, particularly in Australia, what we do for work, it's not something to be taken lightly. At the same time, to continue if someone's not the right fit is not the right thing to do either. So I think it's super important that you are decisive, positive, and then help them really get placed. And then in terms of reflection, ideally you would have some force points of perspective that you set up. So what I mean by that would be when you hire for a new role, if you've done the work on those key deliverables, you would know what the progress needs to look like, almost down to a point of sometimes it would be KPIs or the like. Really mapping out and looking at those points. If the person hasn't delivered, is it poor scoping of the role? Is it poor management? Really getting into the diagnostic side of it. Again, though, the best way you can do this is rapid and staying on top of it early on. I would suggest every team member I've ever seen let go by a client or a business I've worked with, they sort of knew from about a month in. They tend not to move on it. So if that answers the question, I think the reflection, quite often we know early, but we're not honest with ourselves about it. So strong questions about what isn't working for you, and then I would loop that back into the next PD, definitely.
Yeah, and I really like the point about the whole myth of set and forget, right? You hire them and then you just think, oh, we'll just, leave it and let it play out.
Well, that's the dream, right?
That's the dream, of course, but it's never that straightforward, right? So You talk about when you hire someone, checking in with them and providing that feedback and being rapid about it. How, especially when they're starting off, my view is that, as well, you need to have a bit more engagement than someone that's been there for a few years, right? Because they're working with them, their cadence, their style. How often do you think the manager or the person responsible should be checking in with a new hire after they're onboarded? What sort of cadence do you think works well?
Yeah. So totally depends on the business and the style of work. I would say at a minimum, when you're onboarding someone, I would want to create availability, whether it's, say, me, the business owner, or their direct line manager, at least an hour a week of one-to-one check-in. And that's literally as simple as like, how are you going? What are you coming up against? Those kind of things. It would really depend then if you have a structured onboarding process and that's appropriate for the kind of business you have or not. In a lot of small business, it tends to be quite broad in terms of the roles. So as much as possible, I would say try and get them to spend time with other, whether they're senior leaders or good, model good employees in your business, people who do things well, people who problem solve well. Get them to spend time there. Realistically, though, again, in small business, because it is quite adaptable and it's often not as simple as just a PD and straight down the line, and it's very defined. You need to match it to the individual and the feeling of the team. Equally, I think something you can do really that sort of addresses both the individual and the cultural need is creating environments where people bring things that are interesting to them. So call them curated conversations. As the owner, you have a very different viewpoint to what someone on the shop floor or the warehouse floor or in the shared office does. They're looking at things from a different level. So a curated conversation where everyone has a 5-minute piece. To give you an example, I've just done one with a client recently where let's talk about what's the stupidest thing we do around customer interaction process. They've got 3 or 4 different systems that work together, and I think they had to cut that off at a 3-hour meeting because people really knew. But equally, you encourage those kind of feedback loops with an existing team. I think that's a really powerful way to transmit culture to a new employee as well. I know for me, I always want to work in a business where it's quite equitable and people can share opinions and ideas and they're heard. Setting up those kinds of structures early on really bring a lot out of the person as well. So to answer the question more directly, it's a mixture of team dynamic and, again, networking them, helping them understand who does what, but then also giving the individual what they need. And I would say at a minimum once a week. Ideally early on, it's probably daily, an hour.
That's right. I think making that availability to show that you're concerned as well about their transition to the new role, I think helps sort of build that trust in the team, right?
Definitely.
One question that we've got is so this individual has hired someone and is getting has a feeling that some of the existing team members might not be happy with the choice. And of course, in a lot of instances, I think you don't consult every single person in the team, right? When you make a hiring decision, of course, it's done at certain levels with the people team, etc., whatever you have. In those instances, what can you recommend to that person who's now getting a sense that somebody might not be happy with the choice that's been made, to sort of appease them and, I guess, hopefully get their buy-in to the decision?
Yeah, definitely. Super common environment. Like I was saying, if you have a team of 5 or 10, it's 10 or 20% of your workforce can disrupt all of them. So it is super important, and he's probably right in that sense. If he does sense it, there probably is something there. Open lines of communication, ideally. Again, back to the idea of having your one-to-ones with your team, understanding where they're at, what the important things are for them, they feel in achieving their role. If you understand those things and you have that rapport, naturally a lot of this stuff comes out. Really simply, I think it's just about having fairly honest and open conversations, and not so much. I see people get stuck on it where they think that if they open up that conversation, they're then bound to saying, well, if Carl, you don't like me in the business, well, we've got to fire Jake. it's not the case. It's more so what you're looking for there is for the team member who has a concern, it's important that you make them feel heard and you are hearing and acknowledging their concerns. Equally, though, then reflecting back the team dynamic that you're looking to create. And again, that's where that cultural piece comes in. So, as the owner, as a person who runs a business, you do have a unique viewpoint. Sometimes you'll find those conversations go a lot better when you're able to help lift the team member up a level and look at things more objectively. If you get to the point where it's multiple team members and it's really not a good fit, again, it's one you want to move on quickly, I think, and call out if there's a particular behaviour that's an issue. General attitude's hard to know without talking to the individual, but if there's a particular behaviour and it's something that is appropriate to address, I would jump on that early.
Yeah. No, definitely, because it takes a long time to build the culture, and as you say, it can easily be changed for good or for worse. So yeah, I think a lot of these things is addressing it early on, isn't it, rather than letting it fester and
Exactly.
causing disruptions without being manageable.
Definitely.
Yeah, and I think that's sort of a great sort of intro to sort of the whole journey piece which you talked about, right? Which is sort of taking them on that journey. It's they're not just numbers; they are a part of a broader goal from a business perspective.
Definitely. And they're on the journey with you. So, I mean, like to extend on one of the analogies, if your team, if you're driving from Melbourne to Cairns and you've already got to Sydney, you've got the established team with you, you pull over and pick up a hitchhiker and they don't fit well with the car, I don't think you're obliged to take them all the way to Cairns with you.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. That's right. And on that point, right? So around that whole consultation piece, yes, you've got individuals in managerial positions that will most likely call the shots on a lot of these things, right? But what is your view on the degree of consultation that should happen before they go out to hire someone, or before they hire an agency to
Yeah.
the agent agency to find someone, or before they draft a PD or review the PD? Like what degree of consultation should happen among the existing team members? When the manager wants to go out and hire, like what should happen before then?
I would say as much as possible where it doesn't lead to excessive distraction. It's more of a wish list than a shopping list, I guess. It's important to put it across that way to the team. So certainly if someone's going to be a major point of interaction for this new hire, it's super important to know what they want from the role, even down to like what kind of personality fit do we want, or what skill set are we lacking in the team? What do they need to bring? Ideally, if you are well calibrated with the team and you're doing these disciplines around giving those micro pieces of feedback all the time regularly and encouraging others to do so, you'll have a fairly aligned culture. So in that sense, you might not need to actually shop it out. I would say additionally though, like bring people along to an interview for a second perspective. So if you have a senior trusted member of the team that they're likely to interact with, super important that they feel a good personality fit. It might take you an extra 5 hours of 5 billable hours to bring them along to 5 1-hour interviews, but if that stops you hiring the wrong person, that comes back 100-fold in that sense.
Mm. And Jake, one question that we've got is on interviews, and some might just do one interview, or they might have a sequence. What I think the question they're trying to get to is, I think they're trying to understand in their mind, like, what's the purpose sometimes of multiple interviews, right? Because oftentimes it's not really asking different thematic questions, or whether it be technical or problem solving, or more psychometric type.
Yep.
This is probably just trying to get as many people from that managerial position, or from the business, to sort of meet with a new person that they're intending to hire, and seeing whether they like them or not. But do you have any thoughts around, I guess, without going into the detail, of course, but just effective interviewing practices? Is there some methodology that you think would help this person, or that they can read upon?
I've done a lot of interviewing at a corporate level where it is really defined and you're churning through people for days on end. And also helping small business clients. And the one thing that I'd say it comes back to in common that works better than anything else is having a little bit of time before the interview officially starts. So the 10 minutes that say there's a second interviewer coming in, you're in the room with them, you're waiting, it's the small chit chat. You get a really quick feel for what the person's like, particularly because everyone's stressed coming into an interview. You've got the opportunity to break the air a little bit, to even talk about things as simple as understanding what their commute was like and what their attitude about it's like. So if you're going to an interview in person, you're going to a new place physically. You're in a position of vulnerability and you have to learn a new route unless you've been to that building before. So often people show up to an interview flustered. Talking through that and seeing how they think about a situation like that is a really good proxy for how they're likely to act in the new role when they get thrown into it, because arguably that's an even bigger stressor. Is you're learning a new role, you're looking to prove yourself, and you're socially trying to calibrate. So it's magnified in a sense. I'd say in terms of small business, have casual chat as well as some formalized questions, but then jump into, as soon as you can, getting them to do things that are as close to the role as possible. So if there's an opportunity for them to talk to, I don't know, an existing major customer that you have great rapport with, I'd encourage it. Equally, I think most people, it's really difficult to select for 100% what someone's going to be like in the role and interact with the team. So like you're saying, if there is an opportunity to interact with the team, bring it up. If there's if you're confident enough to do it, like bring them along to a team meeting.
That's right. Yeah. I think that the immersion, into the team dynamic is key, right, isn't it?
Enormous, yeah.
Like, it's they've got their own style and ways of working, and it's a great way to assess the fit, isn't it?
Yeah, and realistically in small business, like every hour you're paying for out of your pocket as the owner. So more interviews for the sake of interviews and it's most small business owners, it's not their skill set. So in that sense, like less is probably better, and trialing, it's a bit of a platitude and an overused phrase, but hire slow, fire fast. I think when you're really clear about that, to me, is like know what you want from the role. Often, if you've done the work in definition, you'll get a much better hit rate than a miss rate.
That's I've never heard of that one. Hire slow, fire fast. Yeah, because it does make sense, right? You don't want those that probably don't like the role, or you've scoped it wrong, or they think, oh, it's not really the right fit for me, just sitting around and then sort of, I guess, permeating that negative.
Well, definitely. I mean, no one enjoys working in that scenario either. Like, everyone knows if they're performing, if they're underperforming, or it's not a good fit. So that's a taxing situation for them as well, which likely only magnifies over time. Now, as I was saying, that's where the part for me is, as the person hiring, personally, this is my value, but having a bit of I feel an obligation to try and make sure they land well. So I've brought them in. I would say most of the time, if they don't work, the reflection is on me and the business in scoping out and selecting for the role.
Yeah.
Be really positive and, again, give the feedback, positive and negative.
Yeah. And just on that, Jake, our final question is, this person has hired someone, they thought they would be a great fit. That the individual they hired doesn't seem to like the role and has left.
Yep.
But they are now reflecting on it, and they've thought about maybe their onboarding was a bit too fast and probably threw too much pressure on this new starter. What balance do you see that needs to be struck, right, when you hire someone that it does take a bit of time, right, to get into it, and it depends on how complex the business is. Of course, that'll vary the length of it, but when you onboard someone, right, and you touched upon this as well, right, like there is no, of course, ideal process, right? You have to work with the person and work with the team dynamic, etc. But can sometimes being overbearing or oversharing too much information to get them up to speed. But that also, be a sharp sort of one for your own back type scenario.
Definitely, I like the oversharing piece, and in the end, I believe like work-life integration. It's you showing up to work. It's not this other version of yourself, business owner. It's you showing up to work, and you've got stuff going on. So you're not going to be perfect all the time. It's so yeah, point for reflection on that. But again, I'm probably sounding a bit like a broken record, but if you do collaborate well with the team and rapidly, you quite often know how people are going in terms of that situation you've described there. Maybe something they could have looked at, a method from a manager I really respect in a job when I was a lot younger. Outside of the review, the formalized review system, checking in with people was, all right, let's go to lunch, and you hop in the car and off you go. The first question is, so how are you going? And everyone obviously answers, yeah, good. And then you ask the question again and you get a completely different answer, and you say, no, but like, how are you actually going? Some people that can be too broad. I really like systems that help people. If they can answer anything, sometimes that's crippling for people. I'd say in terms of the pace of onboarding part of the question, something as simple as just saying after finishing a session, out of 10, how confident do you feel with that material now doing that on your own? Or really simply like, are we at a traffic light system? Is that a green light for you? You feel really good about it? Is it red and you just like it didn't work at all? Or amber, we need to focus a little bit more. Constant calibrations like that. And equally, like I was saying, you show up as a business owner and we've got all the baggage of the rest of our life coming into it. So you're not going to be perfect every day. It's exactly the same for the team member. So constant calibration, there's nothing more important you can do.
Perfect. That's been a really great discussion. Jake's details are on screen. So yeah, again, if you do have any questions, please reach out directly to him. And I just can't thank you enough, Jake, for presenting today's seminar. For those who have joined late or have had to pop in and out, this session is being recorded. So you can watch it at your leisure on our YouTube channel following today's closure. And Jake has also prepared a one-page handout, which I'll share with registered participants. So you've got that document handy and you can view it for yourself or share it with family and friends, whoever needs it. So thank you. Yeah, so thank you, Jake. Thank you for attending a Be Informed session. I hope you've learned something today. Please do follow us on social media. And, we rely on word of mouth. There's no advertising budget or anything like that. It's all purely voluntary, and I fund it alone. So we do rely on people to share it with family and friends, and for anyone who might be interested in the future. And if you know anyone that wants to present as well, please do send me an email and we can always have a discussion. So that brings us to the close of formality for today's session. Our next session is in May, looking at sort of superannuation death benefits and how to structure those so that it can be accessed as you intend. So there'll be a presenter sharing more information about that, and you can check out all these details on our social media pages and Eventbrite and all the other channels that we are on. So again, thank you, Jake, very much. Appreciate your time.
Thanks, Carl. It's great, and like big thanks to yourself for putting this together. I think it's a great platform, and really happy to answer any other questions outside of it as well. And yeah, onward and upward.
That's it. That's the way. All right. Have a great night, guys, and bye for now.